Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Damos la bienvenida a todos los miembros y simpatizantes que nos acompañan hoy y damos bienvenida también a nuestro orador invitado, nuestro presidente internacional, Tim Boyd, que ha tenido la deferencia de aceptar compartir esta reunión con nosotros. La reunión está pensada fundamentalmente para hablar sobre las características del trabajo de la Sociedad Teosófica, especialmente en los momentos en los que nos toca vivir. Y con esto no hago referencia solamente a la pandemia y toda esta situación angustiante por sobre todas las cosas que hemos vivido y estamos viviendo a lo largo del año, sino también a lo que significa hacer teosofía y difundir el pensamiento espiritual en las primeras décadas del siglo XXI, más de 100 años después de haber sido creada la Sociedad Teosófica. Esta reunión tiene algunas particularidades que la diferencian respecto a las previas, además de las características fundamentales que tiene el orador, que es nuestro presidente internacional, también porque va a estar en 2 idiomas. Ustedes saben, él es norteamericano, habla en inglés, entiende un poquito el castellano, pero por sobre todas las cosas hemos priorizado la comprensión por parte del auditorio. Entonces vamos a dejar que él hable en inglés y cada vez que él termina una idea, uno de los 2 traductores que colaborarán hoy lo van a traducir al castellano. Y luego yo voy a hacer las preguntas en castellano para que ustedes las entiendan. Y luego se las vamos a traducir en inglés para que las entienda él y las pueda contestar con la mayor exactitud posible. Bueno, había pensado hacer una presentación sobre él, sobre Tim. La mayoría de ustedes, imagino, lo conocen. Él tiene una trayectoria larga en la Sociedad Teosófica. Él se unió a nuestra institución, no recuerdo el año, pero él tenía 19 años en aquel momento, o sea, desde su juventud, y trabajó toda su vida en diferentes áreas de la sociedad. Fue orador nacional, viajó por el país, luego fue secretario general de la sección americana, y desde hace casi 6 años es el presidente internacional de nuestra Sociedad Teosófica. Él tiene una familia, está casado con Lily Boyd, y junto con ella y su hija Angelina, o Angelique, viven en la ciudad de Chicago y viajan regularmente a la India y pasan varios meses del año en Adyar, desde donde se conectan con el mundo teosófico. Vamos a dar la bienvenida a Tim. Welcome, Tim, and thank you in behalf of all the membership of Argentina and some members from South America. We acknowledge your to be here, to have accepted to be with us today.
Muchas gracias a todo. Es todo mi español. Ahora inglés. It's very good to be here. It's been many years now since I was actually in Argentina. Now, of course, this is the best we can do.
Vamos a ir entrando en tema, ya que el tiempo siempre es tirano y nos limita. Y quisiéramos conocer un poco tu pensamiento sobre por qué la Sociedad Teosófica tiene tantas dificultades para aumentar y mantener su membresía en esta época.
That's a question that comes up from time to time around the world. I think really to talk about it, we need to have just a little bit of perspective about the history of the Theosophical Society and its membership. If you trace it back to the peak moment of Theosophical membership, There are actually two peaks. One occurred when Krishnamurti was a young man and we had the Order of the Star. And then after Krishnamurti went in a different direction, the membership of the Theosophical Society dropped by half. And then it was through the efforts of Annie Besant, who made it a point to travel the world, that the membership of the society reached its peak number. And really, since the days of Annie Besant, membership has been diminishing. Currently, we probably have about 24,000 members around the world, a little bit less than half of what it was during Annie Besant's time. So the question, of course, is why? And I'll share what I think. Maybe we'll get a chance to discuss it a little bit differently. The fact is that during the early days of the Theosophical Society, the options for study of an esoteric nature were very few. And really, for someone in those times who had an interest in these subjects, the Theosophical Society was almost the only place someone could go for that type of information. The first generations of theosophists of the Blavatsky Olcott era had a very particular sort of mission they had to fulfill. And for them, it was just to try to develop a language and a way of expressing these profound ideas that we recognize as theosophy. In our second generation, which we could talk about as Leadbitter and Besant and that group, there was yet another mission, which was to expand these teachings and to bring them, try to correlate them with contemporary thinking. And along these two lines, I think one of the things that we view as a problem at this time is the fact that these early theosophists were greatly successful in their mission. When you think about it, we have the luxury of feeling that many of these ideas are normal. Meditation, reincarnation, karma seem very normal thoughts to us. But not too very long ago, these were extremely exotic ideas. Now, of course, any dictionary in any language includes karma or reincarnation, these very exotic sorts of thoughts, meditation. So one of the results of this early work of the Theosophical Society is that other organizations have taken up aspects of this work, not the total work, but aspects of this work. So whether it is India or whether it's Argentina or the United States, there are thousands of groups focused on meditation. There are groups focused on the latent powers within the human beings. There are groups solely focused on the chakras, reincarnation. So for someone who has some interest in some aspect of this very broad picture that Theosophy presents, there are countless directions in which they can be drawn. Some of them very, very good. So necessarily, we could anticipate a drop in the number of people that are focused on the bigger picture that is presented with Theosophy and the Theosophical Society. Another possible issue and perhaps cause of our decrease might be Theosophists themselves. One of the difficulties, and I think one of the things that Krishnamurti found was a limitation on his work, is the very nature of organizations. Because part of what I do is interact with theosophical societies around the world, I am very acutely aware that there are many aspects of the study and approach to theosophy that are influenced by regional or even cultural approaches. As I'm thinking now, you've asked me one question, And I don't want to exhaust our time with this one, but I would like to, the idea, I think, if I could summarize briefly, the Theosophical Society has had great success, and that success has resulted in other avenues that people can pursue. And also with time, I think as members, we need to continually examine our own thoughts so that we don't allow our approach to theosophy to become religious. Maybe we can come back to this question if you like.
No veo mayor problema en que te extiendas en cada una de las preguntas.
Okay.
Porque seguramente al extenderse va a contestar otras preguntas que están planteadas a continuación.
I think that as we go along, I think many of these questions will become quite layered with one another.
Porque la pregunta siguiente consistiría en darnos ideas como para revertir esta situación de pérdida de miembros, porque tal vez parte de las dificultades estén dadas a que las actividades que ofrecemos corresponden a lo que las personas necesitan.
Yeah. There are probably a couple of ways to look at this. I don't believe that this is simply a marketing issue. The Theosophical Society embodies certain profound principles that ideally can be expressed in our lives. Now, there are many ideas, profound ideas. Ideally, these can be expressed in our own lives. That these are ideas that can be applied. We can apply these ideas. Wherever I have seen theosophical activities that have flourished, it has always been connected with people in whom these principles are active. In our earlier question, I was talking about two generations of theosophists, the beginning with Blavatsky, then with Leadbeater and others. Two primary generations we've talked about. And for each one, there was a specific focus related to the broader human community, the broader world. So now, what about our generation? Is it our mission to repeat the work of Blavatsky and Olcott, who did so much work to develop a vocabulary and communicate it and plant the seeds of these ideas in the world? Or is there something different, some other way of magnifying this work that is for us to do? I think it would be a mistake to look for a mass market appeal for theosophy. So I do believe that one of the things that now comes to us, the ideas are here, they are clear. The way that they connect to other ways of thinking, to science, philosophy, those have been developed. So now what do we do? So it does seem to me that our particular work at this time is to actually develop those ways to apply these principles so that they actually react upon the world in which we live. And so then the question for us becomes, how do we do that? Obviously, part of our work will always be to share these ideas in writing, in speaking. This is what we've done for almost 150 years now. But the issues facing humanity today, while similar to previous times, are much more magnified. So the question we ask ourselves might be, what of our understanding of the teachings of theosophy will have the greatest benefit for the world of this moment? And so perhaps we might as we go along, maybe have some ideas with that. I think the Theosophical Society has given some very key ideas that can work if we truly understand them. And the only way that we can anticipate some sort of interest in joining a Theosophical Society is when someone can see people whose lives have been, whose lives are examples of these. I do know that for myself, I'm the international president of the Theosophical Society. But quite honestly, I would not even be a member of the Theosophical Society if I had not had the good fortune to encounter someone in my youth who was alive with these teachings. And that association with a living example is something that made Theosophy real for me and for many others. With this as my background, I am not convinced that the future for the Theosophical Society is a programmatic future. Obviously, everything that we do, whether it's the presentation in writing, in words, we want to bring it to the highest level. But if we think of one of the primary functions of the Theosophical Society as being to introduce to humanity, the possibility for self-transformation. Self-transformation is not something that can specifically be taught. In the Theosophical approach, we speak in terms of the practice as study, meditation, service. So we study as deeply as we can. This is the value of words and writing. We meditate, we try to experiment with the power of quiet, of stillness. So these are things that are internal, that are specific to us as individuals. Certainly our meditation and our study affects the atmosphere around us, but this third aspect of the Theosophical practice, which is the aspect of service, is one in which the internal changes become externalized. And so this type of balance is where I think there's great possibility for us with the Theosophical work. So the type of question that could perhaps arise is, okay, this is all well and good, but what should we do as far as service? Which again is the type of question where we are looking for some sort of specific program that we can apply that can be effective. But I think a more appropriate question would be not what is it that we should do, but what is it that we can do? Again, I will revert to my own personal experience. As a young man in Chicago, a group of us came together, all of us younger people who were interested, who wanted to develop this Theosophical way of living. And we were doing this not specifically with the idea of attracting others, or even not specifically with the idea of influencing others. The neighborhood in which we were had vacant land. It's in the middle of the city of Chicago, but there was much vacant land where buildings had disappeared. We didn't even own the vacant lot, but we decided we would take and we would make a garden there, a food garden, grow our own tomatoes, grow our own peppers, that sort of thing. We developed this little vacant land into an organic garden, which was a great deal of work because it was filled with bricks and stones and bottles. It was a lot of work. In the process of doing this work, other young people in the neighborhood saw us and asked us questions. Even though we were not master gardeners, we shared with them what we knew. We let them work with us. We taught them how to use shovels, how to use rakes, how to do hard work. Out of that contact, they started to ask questions about our way of thinking, our way of living, and we would share with them ideas about the ageless wisdom. And from that, many of them became interested. Many of them actually became members of the Theosophical. And it wasn't because we were teaching a class. It was because we were living our lives and doing what was in front of us to do. So I think a more profound question for us is not how do we do it so much as what is it that I can do? What is it that we as a group together can do? Again, I warned Esteban. He sent me some of these questions. I warned him. I said, look, I am not the king of short answers. Maybe you want fewer questions. So again, I think maybe I'll stop with this. More will come.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here, which I think you have already alluded to as you replied to the last one. So specifically, well, you can answer them or we can move on to the next one, okay? So specifically, what is the message and what activities could be organized in order to make the TS known to more people? What is the message that the Theosophical Society should offer, and what ways and means would be better? In a way, you already replied to that. If you want to round this out, that's okay. Entonces, la pregunta es que si bien le aclaré que eran preguntas que ya había contestado hasta cierto punto en la pregunta anterior, pero entonces, precisamente, ¿cuál es el mensaje que la Sociedad Teosófica debería ofrecer? ¿Qué medios, qué modos serían necesarios? ¿Qué actividades debería tener la Sociedad Teosófica para hacerla llegar a más gente?
Quite honestly, I think in terms of interesting people in the Theosophical Society and its work, there are things we can do. And I think the main aspect of that is to just, in any way that we can, make sure that the Theosophical Society's name is seen, and that the way in which it's seen, to the extent that we have any influence over that it can be seen in a positive manner. This does not mean that in and of itself will attract new members, but here's the way this thing works. All of us probably have televisions, and if you have a television, I guarantee you watch more advertisements than you do actual television shows where they are trying to sell you shoes, cars, beer, everything. But because you see that, if I see an advertisement for a car, it doesn't mean I leave the television and then go buy a car. The idea is that at whatever point it is that I find myself with a need for this object or this idea, at that point, perhaps I will remember. And I think one thing that I think is correct is that the people who are actively searching for the very expansive context of the spiritual life offered by Theosophy, those people are few in number. It's much easier to find one of the many hundreds of meditation groups and focus on that one small piece of the Theosophical picture. So here's an example. About a week and a half ago, I participated in a very good level panel in one of these Zoom type conferences. So it was something that was organized around a movie related to the scientist David Bohm and his relationship with Krishnamurti. if I'm not mistaken, I think it's also translated into Spanish. It's called Infinite Potential. But the movie had been released online the week before, and 500,000 people had seen the movie. They had had one similar panel before the one I participated in, but the one I participated in, they told us had the highest registration of anything that they had done for that. So 31,000 people viewed that panel, viewed my particular participation as international president of the Theosophical Society. Did it affect membership?
¿Eso afectó a la membresía?
No.
No.
We got some letters. We might have gotten a couple of people, 3, 4, 5, 10 people who joined the Theosophical Society, but our thought and our name are well represented. So I think that's one way that, one thing that we have to continually do.
Bueno, ya el tiempo va pasando, pero quisiera tener algún comentario de parte tuya, Tim, ya que al comienzo de la charla mencionaste que uno de los motivos por los cuales ahora es más difícil aumentar la membresía se debe a la gran variedad de ofertas, algunas de ellas muy buenas, que tienen las personas que quieran explorar las enseñanzas espirituales. Por lo tanto, ¿cuál cree que hoy es la característica diferencial de la Sociedad Teosófica sobre otras organizaciones?
Probably if you are like me, then in your search for truth and teachings related to truth, you have probably looked in many different directions. I know certainly I have. And my search in various directions brought me to a certain clear conclusion that there is nothing that I have found or I am aware of that has the clarity, has the depth, and has the extremely expansive context that Theosophy provides. If I had found that, I would not be here.
Yes.
So that's, to me, is what separates, I mean, it doesn't separate, but that is what is distinctive. That it is the depths of our possible understanding and the possibility for awakening within this theosophy is limitless. So for me, that's something that makes it worth working for, worth trying to deepen my understanding, worth trying to expand it so that others will be able to actually experience something similar.
Cambiando un poco el ámbito del tema, yendo a los tiempos presentes, de la pandemia, de problemas sociales, económicos, políticos, especialmente en el presente, ¿qué cualidades piensas que nosotros como teósofos, miembros de la teosofía, deberíamos desarrollar para tratar con el miedo, la ansiedad que está presente en tanta gente?
Yeah, I think that's a very important part of what it is we are here to do. Very often, I mean, always there will be crises that come into our lives and that come into the world. For many people who, for many years, have been engaged in this practice of deepening,
Sí.
what we find is that as the crises come, we have a resource to draw upon. For those who are new to this sort of practice or discipline, then you find that it's something that gives some added strength. But a time like this moment where we have such uncertainty, such fear surrounding us is challenging. I know people who have a genuine and deep practice, spiritual practice, who are theosophists, who have been deeply shaken by the isolation that has been enforced during this pandemic, who find a certain sadness in grieving for the world and the life that they have lost. This is very natural, but it's something that sometimes we think we can protect ourselves from these, that our practice protects us from these. Everyone has the experience of being fearful. Many people do not have the advantage, however, of one of the things that comes with a time of practice, which is awareness. So to those many who are in fear, but who don't have the awareness to even know that this is what is going on, those ones are being swept in very strange and different directions. But I think part of what it is that is our duty at this moment is to recognize these qualities that are around us and that are also within us. Because what we find is that expansion, self-transformation, these are words. These are things that we talk about. But at the root of every one of these, first, we must be able to see and to see clearly. And in the process of seeing, what we find is that what's perceived as fear, what's perceived as sadness, has a way of dissolving under this quality. And this is something that provides a qualitative energy to the people around us and to the greater world. At Adyar in India, normally from last month on through the winter, that's where I would be right now. Right now I'm in Chicago. Quite honestly, the way the pandemic is moving in India and in the rest of the world, I'm very uncertain about when the next window will open where I can actually be in India. But one of the facts of our campus at Adyar is that we have about 100 people who are actually living there. But in general, the population of residents are very vulnerable to this pandemic by virtue of age. So there is a certain degree of, well, certainly there's caution, but there's also a certain degree of fear within that group of our residents about this pandemic. So part of the role is to try to create the conditions there at Adyar that allow for a deepening peace of mind, a deepening sense of security among the people who live there. So again, maybe this is something that many people would not think of as theosophy, but in addition to the people who live there, we have 130 people who work there, whose livelihood depends on the Theosophical Society. All of these, India is a very different country from Argentina, from the United States, but all of these 130 people were barred from going to work by the Indian government. Isolation was enforced. And these people they're not members of the Theosophical Society. They're people who work on the garden, who work on maintenance, who work in the library. But again, from our point of view, we had the sense that there is something that we must do on their behalf, something they cannot do for themselves. So among those things, we have provided free medical care for any of the people that work there. anyone who has worked there, no matter how long they have been prevented from coming to work, we made certain that they were paid during that time. It was not their fault. And for very many of them, the difference between getting this week's paycheck and not getting it is the difference between eating and not eating. So this is just an example of just some things that are coming to mind. Is this theosophy? I would say yes. These people know nothing about the chakras beyond what they learn in Hindu religious teachings.
Esta
They
gente
know
no sabe
nothing
nada.
about the planes of nature from our point of view. But what they do know is that kindness and compassion are universal. And theosophy has never really been, there's never a short definition that has been provided about theosophy. Blavatsky said a couple of different things, but I think one of the things that she said, which is meaningful to me, and that was that theosophy is altruism first and foremost.
Bueno, estamos llegando ya a la hora de cierre. Quería no pretender hacer un resumen, pero destacar algunas de las ideas que encuentro especialmente relevantes en la charla de hoy. Es decir, que una de las cosas que dijo es que una de las formas de difundir la teosofía más importante que las palabras o de la enseñanza que podamos dar es a través del ejemplo que podamos mostrar. Y que este ejemplo, según lo que estuvimos escuchando, debe darse a través de la conducta individual de cada uno de nosotros en nuestra vida diaria y en la sociedad teosófica, pero también, y esto es la primera vez que lo escucho, de la sociedad teosófica como organización. Esto significa que tenemos que ser generosos nosotros, pero que la organización teosófica también debería ser generosa. Nosotros tenemos que ser desprendidos en lo material y en lo afectivo y estar dispuestos a dar, pero también como organización no podemos mostrarnos avaros y extremadamente celosos y preocupados por el patrimonio físico, ¿no? Y no tener, y no proyectar muchas veces esa imagen de como es dinero de la sociedad, entonces no hay que compartirlo, o como es de la sociedad, y poner tanto celo que convierta a la sociedad en un contraejemplo de lo que un teósofo debería ser.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be responsible, but yes.
Okay, is there something else you would like to add before the closing?
I think just, and this time I will be brief. Times like this, very often, it's very easy for us as small people, small organization, to feel powerless. But Mother Teresa was fond of saying, we cannot do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Always our goal, our role in this world is to plant seeds, seeds of thought, but always seeds that are full of our heart. Punto.
Thank you very much for your time and your participation today.
Thank you, Esteban, for asking me.
We have here members from Argentina, but also from many other countries.
I see Peru. I see many friends that I have seen in different places around the world.
Yes,
and also
you can see Peru, Spain, the United States also, and Colombia, and Chile, and
wonderful.
Brazil. I said, well, you will see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias a todos por la participación. Les recuerdo que los próximos 2 sábados tendremos una charla el teósofo argentino, pero residente en España, Carlos Pérez, que nos hablará sobre la conciencia global. Así que los esperamos el próximo sábado a esta misma hora. Thank you to everyone. Gracias a todos. Hasta la próxima.
A la próxima.
Chao, chao.